Flight 271 cruised steadily at 35,000 feet above the vast darkness of the western United States. Outside the windows, the sky looked endless, a deep ocean of black sprinkled with distant stars. Inside the aircraft, the soft hum of the engines blended with quiet conversations and the glow of entertainment screens. Passengers were relaxed after hours in the air. Some watched movies with headphones on, others leaned against their seats trying to sleep. Flight attendants moved calmly through the aisle, offering drinks and blankets. Everything about the journey felt routine, the kind of peaceful flight travelers rarely even remember after landing. In row 8, however, one passenger sat with a stillness that seemed almost deliberate. A woman in her early 30s gazed quietly out of the window, her expression calm and unreadable. She wore simple civilian clothes, dark jeans, a grey jacket and practical shoes. To the people around her, she looked like any other traveler heading home after a long trip, but beneath that quiet presence was years of intense training and discipline. She was a highly trained United States Navy SEAL officer, trusted with missions few people would ever hear about. Within classified operations circles, she carried the call sign Valkyrie, a name earned through courage and precision. For most of the flight, she had remained silent, occasionally glancing at the sky outside or closing her eyes for brief moments of rest. Her posture remained straight, even while seated, a habit built from years of military discipline. The passengers next to her barely noticed her presence. To them, she was simply another traveler sharing the long flight across the country. Yet her mind remained alert, constantly aware of her surroundings. It was the kind of awareness that never truly disappears after years in special operations. Even in a commercial cabin full of ordinary passengers, her instincts quietly monitored every sound and movement around her. Far ahead of the passenger cabin, inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was just as calm. A captain and first officer monitored their instruments while maintaining routine communication with air traffic control. The aircraft followed its planned route smoothly, crossing the dark sky with steady precision. Navigation lights blinked rhythmically on the wings, while the autopilot handled most of the workload. For the crew, it seemed like another normal shift in the sky. They reviewed weather reports, confirmed their altitude, and discussed the expected arrival time. Nothing about the night suggested that anything unusual was about to interrupt the peaceful rhythm of the flight. Then suddenly the cockpit filled with a sharp burst of static. The radio crackled loudly, cutting through the calm atmosphere like a warning siren. A firm voice came over the frequency, urgent and direct. "Unidentified aircraft, respond immediately." The captain exchanged a quick glance with the first officer before reaching for the microphone. The signal wasn't coming from civilian air traffic control. Instead, the transmission carried the clear tone of a military communication channel. Within seconds, the pilots realized they were being contacted by two F-35 fighter jets operating from a nearby United States airbase. The captain responded quickly, identifying the aircraft and explaining their flight path. But the response from the fighter pilots carried a level of seriousness that immediately raised concern. According to their radar systems, the airline had triggered an unusual signal connected to a military detection network earlier that evening. The pilots of the F-35s requested verification of a security code related to a classified military operation that had taken place earlier that day. The request placed the captain in a difficult position. Commercial flight crews rarely possess access to military authentication codes, and this aircraft certainly did not. Inside the cockpit, tension slowly began to build. The captain explained again that they were operating a routine civilian flight with no connection to military operations. But the fighter pilots insisted that verification was required to confirm that the aircraft was not involved in a security breach. The misunderstanding could potentially escalate if the issue wasn't resolved quickly. The captain remained calm, but the seriousness of the situation was clear. Two advanced fighter jets were now flying within visual range of the airliner, monitoring its movement carefully while waiting for confirmation from the crew. Meanwhile, word of the unusual communication began to spread quietly through the cabin crew. One of the flight attendants received instructions to stay calm while discreetly checking if any passengers might have government or military credentials that could help clarify the situation. Trying not to alarm anyone, she walked slowly down the aisle, her professional smile hiding a growing sense of concern. A few passengers noticed the slightly tense atmosphere and began whispering among themselves. Although no announcement had been made, people could sense that something unusual was unfolding somewhere beyond the cabin walls. Back in row 8, the quiet woman had already noticed the subtle shift in the cabin's energy. Her eyes opened slowly as she listened to the faint sounds coming from the forward section of the aircraft. Even without hearing the cockpit radio directly, she could recognize the pattern of events. The movement of the crew, the quiet urgency in their voices, and the brief flashes of concern on their faces told her enough. Years of experience had taught her how quickly routine situations could turn serious. She remained calm, observing silently while confirming her suspicions. When the flight attendant approached her row, the woman gently lifted her hand to stop her. The attendant paused politely, expecting a routine request for water or assistance. Instead, the passenger spoke in a calm, steady voice that carried quiet authority. "You might want to inform the captain," she said softly, "that Valkyrie is on board." For a moment, the flight attendant simply blinked, unsure what the statement meant. The name sounded unusual, almost like a nickname or code word. Yet the confidence in the woman's voice suggested she understood exactly what was happening. Still slightly confused, but sensing the seriousness behind the request, the flight attendant nodded and walked quickly toward the cockpit. She quietly repeated the message to the captain, expecting it might not mean much. But the reaction she witnessed shocked her completely. The captain's expression changed instantly. His eyes widened as he looked toward the first officer in disbelief. The call sign, Valkyrie, was not just any name. In military briefings and aviation circles, it belonged to one of the most respected special operations officers working alongside elite United States forces. Without wasting another second, the captain asked the attendant to escort the woman from row 8 to the cockpit area. When she arrived, he respectfully handed her a secure communication headset connected directly to the aircraft radio. The woman accepted it calmly, as though stepping into a role she had performed many times before. The tension in the cockpit remained heavy as the fighter jets continued to circle nearby in the dark sky. Then, with complete confidence, the woman placed the headset over her ears and spoke clearly into the microphone. "Falcon Flight, this is Valkyrie," she said in a steady voice. "Authentication code incoming." High above the clouds, the night sky stretched endlessly around Flight 271. The commercial airliner continued moving forward through the dark horizon, but the atmosphere around it was far from ordinary. Just a short distance away, two powerful F-35 fighter jets flew in formation, their sleek silhouettes bare, visible against the moonlit sky. Their engines hummed with quiet strength as they monitored the passenger aircraft closely. Inside the cockpit of the airliner, the tension was thick and unmistakable. Every second felt longer than usual as the crew waited for the response that could determine how the situation would unfold. Inside the passenger cabin, however, life continued almost normally. Soft cabin lights glowed above the rows, while travelers remained absorbed in their own small worlds. Some passengers watched movies on seat screens, others leaned against their windows half asleep. A few whispered conversations drifted quietly between seats, None of them could see the fighter jets outside or hear the tense military communication happening in the cockpit. To them, the flight felt routine and peaceful. They had no idea that just beyond the cabin door, a serious misunderstanding in the skies was being resolved. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere had changed completely. The captain and first officer stood quietly, while the woman from row 8 held the secure radio headset. Her calm posture carried the confidence of Somi, who had faced far more dangerous situations before. There was no panic in her voice, no hesitation in her movements. She spoke clearly into the microphone, requesting confirmation from the fighter pilots circling nearby. For the flight crew watching beside her, the moment felt real. Just minutes earlier, she had been an ordinary passenger, and now she was calmly communicating with advanced military aircraft. Her voice traveled across the open sky through encrypted communication channels. "Falcon, flight, confirm authentication," she said firmly. The cockpit fell completely silent after her words were transmitted. Even the steady hum of the aircraft seemed quieter as everyone waited for the response. Outside, the 2 F-35 pilots received the code and quickly ran the verification through their onboard systems. For a few long seconds, nothing came back through the radio. Those brief moments felt like an eternity to the captain and first officer standing beside her. Then the radio came alive again. One of the fighter pilots responded with a steady voice that carried a new tone of certainty. "Authentic. Asian confirmed. Valkyrie." Instantly, the entire atmosphere shifted. The tension that had filled the cockpit only moments earlier seemed to dissolve into relief. The captain exchanged a glance with his first officer, both realizing the situation had finally stabilized. The fighter pilots now understood exactly who they were speaking with, and had recognition brought immediate respect to the conversation unfolding across the dark sky. For the 2 pilots flying the F-35s, the call sign Valkyrie was far from ordinary. In military aviation circles, it belonged to a highly trusted U.S. Navy SEAL officer known for working closely with elite units during sensitive operations. Hearing that voice, over the radio confirmed that the aircraft they had intercepted was not involved in any hostile activity. The lead fighter pilot spoke again, this time with calm professionalism. The tension that had driven their earlier warnings had now been said with a cooperative tone. "Ma'am, we were alerted to a signal connected to a classified training exercise earlier today," the lead pilot explained over the radio. "Our systems detected a transmission matching that equipment profile. We needed confirmation before allowing the aircraft to continue through this sector." The explanation made sense immediately. Earlier that day, military forces had conducted a training operation involving specialized communication equipment. That equipment, now being transported on the passenger aircraft, had triggered a detection alert on military radar systems. "Standing beside Captain." Valkyrie listened carefully before replying. She gave a small nod, even though the fighter pilots could not see her through the darkness separating the aircraft. "That signal came from equipment being transported on this flight," she explained calmly. "The cargo is secured and part of a scheduled transfer. Everything is under control." Her voice carried the calm authority of someone accustomed to high-level operations. The clarity of her explanation quickly resolved the final doubts the pilots had about the aircraft. Within moments, the entire situation shifted from caution to cooperation. The fighter jets adjusted their positions slightly and moved into a protective escort formation beside the passenger aircraft. Instead of monitoring it as a potential threat, they now guided it safely along its route through the edge of restricted airspace. Outside the windows of the cockpit, faint lights from the jets could occasionally be seen gliding smoothly through the night sky. For the flight crew, the sight was both impressive and reassuring. Inside the passenger cabin, however, the travelers remained completely unaware of the dramatic moment unfolding just beyond their view. A few passengers shifted in their seats or stretch their legs as the flight continued quietly. The flight attendants maintained their professional calm, serving drinks and answering routine questions from passengers who had no idea that military jets were flying just a short distance away. The entire situation had been handled so smoothly that no announcement was ever needed. After several minutes of calm communication with the fighter pilots, Valkyrie removed the secure headset and handed it back to the captain. Her expression remained relaxed, as though the entire situation had been nothing more than a brief interruption. "Your flight is clear," she said with a small, polite smile. The captain accepted the headset slowly, still processing the remarkable turn of events. Just minutes earlier, he had been facing a serious misunderstanding with military aircraft. Now everything had been resolved by the quiet passenger, Udru, who had stepped forward at exactly the right moment. "Thank you, Commander," the captain said respectfully, recognizing her rank and experience. His voice carried genuine gratitude. Without her presence on board, the situation might have taken much longer to resolve. Valkyrie simply nodded politely in response. She did not seek attention or praise. For her, handling unexpected situations calmly was simply part of the responsibility she had accepted long ago. With the matter settled, she quietly stepped away from the cockpit and returned to the passenger cabin. When she reached row 8 again, she sat down as if nothing unusual had happened. She fastened her seatbelt and looked out the window toward the distant horizon. Far away, the faint lights of the escorting fighter jets slowly faded as the aircraft left the restricted area of airspace. The cabin remained peaceful, filled only with the quiet sounds of travel. Anyone else, looking at her now, would see only a calm passenger watching the stars outside the aircraft window. Hours later, Flight 271 landed smoothly at its destination airport. As the aircraft touched down and rolled along the runway, many passengers began clapping in appreciation for the crew's work. To them, it had been a comfortable and uneventful journey across the country. They gathered their bags, thanked the flight attendants, and prepared to leave the plane. None of them realized that a potentially serious military misunderstanding had quietly unfolded high above the clouds during their flight. Among the passengers walking through the terminal was the same calm woman who had sat in row 8. She moved through the crowd without drawing attention, blending easily with the travelers around her. For everyone else, the flight would soon become just another memory of a routine trip across the United States. But hidden within that ordinary journey was a moment when a single calm voice prevented confusion in the skies above America. Sometimes the greatest acts of service happen quietly, unnoticed by the very people they protect.